now that we've finished our face shield, our social distance alarm, as well as our SOS, we can go ahead and start on our project. So object of this project is to make a bridge, a one-lane bridge. So we're going to go ahead and start with just the west side of the bridge, so just one side of the bridge. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new circuit and wait for that to load. So we know how to wire and code ultrasound sensors, LEDs, and servos. So those are the three main components in the bridge. So we're going to be using those components just in a different orientation than for the last couple projects. So the first thing we need to do is bring in a breadboard. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Components and All. I just want a big breadboard this time. So we're going to scroll down. Then we find the breadboards and bring in the big breadboard. And then as well, we also want the Arduino, just like last time. And we're also going to need some LEDs. So I'm going to go back to basic and grab an LED, another LED, and another LED. Looks like my Arduino didn't come in, so bring that in again. Do that again. There we go. So now I've got Arduino and 3 LEDs. Let's start with those. So we want one red, one yellow. I want one green, because those are going to be our stoplight. We've got red, yellow, and green on a stoplight. And then I'm going to go ahead and before we start, just go ahead and rotate this Arduino board. Just so the digital pins are facing the breadboard. That will make our wiring a little easier later on. So for our LEDs, I'm going to rotate them so they're facing, so the legs are facing the breadboard. Just like that. And for our LEDs, remember there's 2 legs. There's the bent leg and the straight leg. The bent leg is the one that goes to the Arduino, and the Arduino tells it when to turn on and when to turn off. And then the straight leg, right, that one goes to ground. Right, and remember, just like our lower the face shield, we had to go into ground through a resistor. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out a resistor as well. Remember, it's a 220 ohm resistor. Otherwise, it's going to be too dim for us to see. If the resistance is too high, the LEDs are too dim. Not enough current going through. So let's start with those straight legs. So because they're all going to the same place, right, they're all getting grounded, we can go ahead and put them in the same row on that breadboard. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in row 1. So they're all in row 1. And then they need to get grounded, but we also need a resistor. So I'm going to put that resistor on that same row and say row 1, and then to ground. So now all of the LED legs, because remember on the breadboard, these are all connected. So they're all connected together, and they all go to ground through their resistor. That's why we only need 1 resistor right now, instead of like the last project where we had 2. So now we've got 1 resistor. They're all getting grounded through that resistor, so they're all still safe in that safe current zone, so they won't blow up. And then this last part is just to connect our bent legs, right, to our Arduino. So we're going to go ahead and connect the green one, our green LED, to pin 2 on the Arduino. The yellow one to pin 3. And then lastly, we need the red one to pin 4. So I'm going to move these wires to give me a little more space. So the red one to pin 4, just like that. And let's go ahead and change these colors of wires so we can tell what's what. Change that to yellow. Oh, and I'm not going to make this one red because typically I have red as 5 volts, whereas this is going to the Arduino. So let's change that one. There we go. So now I've got my LEDs connected to the Arduino. I tell them when to turn on and off, and they're also connected to ground, so they're completed. The circuit's completed. But just like in the lower the face shield, in order for this to actually be ground, right, we need to connect our ground from the Arduino. So I'm going to go ahead and take ground from Arduino and stick it in our breadboard there. And then, once we've got that, we can go ahead and wire our ultrasound sensor. So let's scroll down. And we have to go to components and all. Let's find that 4-pin ultrasound sensor. I'm going to go ahead and put it down here and rotate it around. So let's look at our pins of our ultrasound sensor. So if we remember this one's ground. Right, so we can put it on her negative rail, but right now our Arduino is only connected to this ground. So we're going to need to make a wire that goes from this ground to this ground. And now this whole negative rail is also ground. So we can go ahead and connect the ultrasound sensor to it, and now it'll be ground. And then we have the echo. Right, so we've got echo and trig. So I'm going to go put echo into A3. Let's bring it up and around all the way to the top. Into A3. And then trigger is going to go into A4. So you might be looking at this wiring and thinking it's kind of strange. Like there's a long way to go for this ultrasound sensor and putting it in these top A pins. So if you're building this circuit in person, this wiring is actually going to be a lot simpler for building it in person. So that's why we're connecting them all the way up here, just in case you end up building this in person. So I'm going to go ahead and change those colors of wires because they're going to the Arduino. So I just want to make sure they're not power or ground wires. And then we've got power, right? Right now we don't have any power coming from the Arduino. Right? So let's go ahead and take this 5 volts from the Arduino and connect it to our breadboard. So our breadboard will have 5 volts. So I'm going to go ahead and connect it to that positive rail here. And remember, just like our ground, we also want 5 volts down here. So I'm going to just take a jumper wire and connect those two positive rails. Now they'll both be 5 volts. So anything I plug into the positive rails will be 5 volts. So you can go ahead and take power and connect it to that positive rail. Just like that. So now our ultrasound is fully wired. And our last step is just to add a servo. Right? So we've got our LEDs telling cars when they can go, our ultrasound sensor sensing when there's cars there, and then our servo is going to be the gate that can opens and closes to allow cars to pass. So in basic components, we can bring out our servo. I'm going to go ahead and put it here. And for our servo, very similar, remember, right? We've got our ground. Let's put that to the negative rail. We've got our power. That goes to the positive rail. All right, that's our 5 volts. And let's change that color. And then we've got our signal. So our signal, we're going to go ahead and put in A5. So let's bring that up and around and put it into A5. Change that wiring so I've got less wires crossing. Just move some wires around, make it a little cleaner. Our servo goes into A5. So down. There we go. So now we've got our servo, our ultrasound sensor, and our LEDs fully wired. And that's all we need for our west side of the bridge. So here we have one-way west, and I'm going to name this one-way west so I don't come back later and not know what it is. So make sure you rename it one-way west. For your servo, ultrasound sensor, and LEDs fully wired, we can go ahead and start looking at how to code this thing.